Okay, the time is now 6 o'clock, so we are going to start the meeting. Thank you for coming, everyone. I'd just like to introduce everybody on the bench. I'm Councillor Peacock and I'm going to be chairing this meeting. Next to me is Councillor Sue Burfoot, who is the Deputy Chair. Next to Councillor Burfoot is Chris Dale, who is the Council Development Manager. Next to him is Stephen Dudhill from Derbyshire County Council Highways Department. We are honoured. And at the end of the row we've got Denise Knipe, is that your name? Who's a planning consultant. On my left is Kerry France, the Council Monitoring Officer, and John Ramsey from Democratic Services. Do we have any apologies for absence this evening?
Through you, Chair, we have received apologies from Councillor David Burton, Councillor John Boynton, and their substitute is Councillor Anthony Bates, and Councillor Peter Dobbs, and their substitute is Councillor Joe Linthwaite.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is interests. Would anybody like to declare an interest? Nope, okay. So next on the agenda is public participation. Now, I would like, we have a lot of speakers tonight. There are a number of objectors, members of the public and representatives of various groups who are going to be given 3 minutes each. However, I would ask you to remember that there are 19 speakers in total on the list. If you can possibly speak in less than 3 minutes, then I would encourage you to do so. I think sometimes brevity enables you to get your point across more effectively. Anyway, let's start though. Councillor Martin Spencer, representing Ashbourne Town Council. You've got 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'd just like to apologise for my voice. I've had the dreaded lurgy going around and afraid it's left me a bit speaking like Lee Marvin, really, so I'm not going to break into song. I'm here to object to Windsor Close. Members feel that the proposed development will set a precedent for future developments for the settlement boundary. It contravenes policy PD2 of the local plan. It isn't an allocated site in the local plan and contravenes policy HOU1 of the neighbourhood plan. Members raised concerns regarding the narrow entrance stroke exit of Windsor Close, which is only suitable for one vehicle, with information in the transport statement being inaccurate, and also the possibility of widening the road is not possible because due to the land being in the ownership of residents. Members raised concerns that the proposed development will cause issues of flooding on the Green Road, which already floods, and also issues of parking on Manor Road, which already suffers with traffic dropping off and picking up school children. There is no information on managing surface waste and sewage connection, which is already known to be problematic on this large estate. The plan would have a significant impact on residents and their amenities and become a thoroughfare with no provision to alleviate the impact of the town services either, GPs, hospitals and schools, resulting in further traffic congestion. The Town Council has respectfully requested a site visit, which apparently took place yesterday, and it's hoped that the DDDC Planning Committee gained a full insight on just how narrow Windsor Close is and the negative impact it would have on residents both on Windsor Close and on Manor Road and in fact even the Green Road. Thank you for your opportunity to speak, and I hope that you will take into consideration the objections on board and vote in favour of the residents of Windsor Close, Manor Road and the Green Road. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for coming in under time. The next speaker is Chris Walker, and the speaker after that will be James Pavey.
Good evening. Chris Walker, Chair of Offcote and Underwood Parish Council. This council is unanimously opposed to the proposed development of Windsor Close. This application has undergone many changes to the point that it's almost unrecognisable in comparison to the original application, but as a council we have pointed out that there are factual inaccuracies in the original application, yet some are still being repeated within this revised application. Of particular concern are the assumptions that a satisfactory pedestrian access can be provided to serve the site. It seems to have been reluctantly accepted that footpaths on Windsor Close cannot be achieved due to the refusal by residents to provide access to the land required. So too, footpath 10 to the south of the site and access across the green also cannot be achieved because of the refusal of the landowners to grant access. This only leaves footpath 15 to the north of the site as a possible pedestrian access. It beggars belief that the Highways Authority should consider this as an adequate solution. What reasonable person is going to go uphill to the top of the estate at a gradient of 1 in 12 to 1 in 20 and then go back down again on entering Athlow Brow to proceed to town and when returning home to repeat the ordeal? It's plainly obvious that pedestrians will use Windsor Close as the easy option, particularly those with ambulatory issues who most need an easy access, parents supervising children and children at play. For it to be then stated by Highways that because the Windsor Close residents already have a shared access with traffic due to a lack of pavements on a cul-de-sac, 10 dwellings with no problems, then to add another 30 houses and convert it to a thoroughfare will not be a problem, and that astounds me. An extra 60 or so cars, the proposal is totally ridiculous. This is a recipe for disaster and someone is going to get hurt or killed. There are a list of conditions stated within the report, many of which are listed to be reserved matters. I've been a councillor on this parish for 34 years and I've seen a number of instances where planning conditions are not followed through to completion by the planning officers, either through overwork or officers moving on and the issues being forgotten or neglected. And developments continue to the detriment of the parish and the community that we serve, with no viable solution to resolve the issues thus neglected. This application should not be approved unless all factual errors within it are first sorted and the issues are deemed achievable. They should not be left to reserve matters and it should not come back to this committee until then. It is very obvious by the number of interested people here tonight and the 355 entries on the planning portal that there is a great deal of public concern about this application. I ask you to seriously consider what is being said by the community here tonight and to dismiss this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, James Pavey. The next speaker after that will be Stephen Liverman.
Thank you. I'm a partner of Erwin Mitchell. I act for Angela Hunt, who lives at the Green Hall, Ashbourne. But more importantly, she's the owner and the custodian of Ashbourne Green, which is 46 acres of common, which, if it's not immediately familiar, you would have seen yesterday in the site visit. Angela apologises that she's unable to be here this evening, but she wanted her voice heard. And I'm afraid as her solicitor, you've got the second best from me this evening. But just to frame the issue, I have sympathy with you. You've got in front of you a report which strains to suggest you should approve this application. It relies heavily on the tilted balance in NPPF paragraph 11. And no doubt the council is under constraints and pressure in terms of housing. But here we have to take note that paragraph 11 of the National Planning Policy Framework it contains a presumption. That is a presumption, it's not a hard and fast rule. Where there's an adverse impact of granting permission and it would significantly outweigh the benefits, you have your full gamut of planning judgment to exercise here. And there are three adverse impacts I want to highlight. Firstly, access. You've already heard about it, you'll hear more about it. It's not a reserved matter, it can't be kicked down the road by way of conditioning. There's an insufficiency of evidence from the applicant to demonstrate that there is safe and suitable access via Windsor Close. There is a sufficiency of evidence from those who live in Windsor Close and experts on their behalf that it's too narrow, it can't be widened, there is no space for footpaths, it doesn't work as an access to the site. Flood risk, which is my client's, if you like, predominant concern, she's had her own home flooded by water coming off the same ridge at the back. There's, again, an insufficiency of evidence to make a decision to approve this in the knowledge that there is a sound flood risk management strategy that is there and is encompassed in the application. There's also a matter of concern. Reading the Asbury report, it was the failure to make available certain of the applicant's information as recorded in that report, available for public consultation and also for scrutiny. And that alone, I think, is enough to see that any grant could be challenged by way of judicial review. Thirdly, harm to the character and appearance of the countryside. You've been there on your site visit. I don't need to labour the steepness of the slope, the views across Ashbourne Green. And finally, feasibility. We say this is a matter where feasibility becomes more than just a background matter. It is a material consideration, and no one should be in any doubt here that if works are done to try to implement access across the common or drainage across the common, they won't be permitted, no easement's going to be granted, and indeed proceedings will be taken to stop them. But if your legal advisor disagrees with me, tells you should disregard what I've just said, you should consider that. But I would say you should also disregard any assurances you have had from the applicant that he can deliver on this.
Okay, that's your time up. Thank you. Okay, so next is Mr. Stephen Liverman, and after that, Kim Dorrington.
Thank you for taking time to listen to our objections this evening. My name's Stephen Liverman and I'm from the Windsor Close Action Group. Many of the documents in the recommendations are now outdated, inaccurate or contradictory, or all three. And it's impossible to tell what you're being asked to approve. Paragraph 2.6 in the officer's report sets out the documents the recommendations is supposed to be based on, but in fact has used LHA documents instead. The transport statement is from January 24 and has never been updated. It states that the 2-metre wide footpaths can be installed in Windsor Close. This was proved not to be the case 2 years ago. The LHA objected to that report and nothing has changed. Nothing in the applicant documents mentions pedestrian prioritised street design. This is a creation of the LHA and is not in the list of documents you are asked to approve. The flood risk details you are asked to approve are from 2024. We know the lead flood authority responses that more information has been provided to the planning officer, but it's not on the portal. This new information is what the LFA permission is based on, but you're being asked to approve the old documents. You're asked to approve 2 different access junction layouts, even though the LHA have pointed out the most recent design uses land which doesn't belong to the applicant and is therefore not deliverable. Road levels, gradients, swept path analysis for emergency and service vehicles and speed management are all reserved matters. You're being asked to decide if this is a safe and suitable access without any of those details. The transport statement you're asked to approve states that the agricultural traffic will come through Windsor Close. Condition 7 says agricultural traffic needs to go via the existing access. The arboricultural impact assessment, which you're asked to approve, states that 3 trees must be removed for health and safety reasons, but condition 17 says there is to be no trees removed. This application has been going on for so long, and the documents are outdated and contradictory. There is no justifiable way to approve. I ask the committee to refuse this application.
Okay. Thank you. The next speaker is Kim Dorrington, and after that is David Coakley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a chartered civil engineer of 42 years' experience, including as Strategic Director of Highways, Transport and Engineering for Manchester City Council, i.e. the Director of their local highways authority. You're being asked to approve an officer's report recommendation here based upon LHA input, not documents submitted by the applicant. Members should be aware of the errors made by the LHA, and we implore you to ask serious questions of them to explain themselves as public officers, which they've repeatedly refused to do for us. In your planning meeting of the 13th of August 2025, members recognised the need to properly assess evidence from the public. We all expect the LHA to provide expert feedback and input into the planning process. This is not the case here. The LHA wrongly informed the applicant that service strips could be used as footways. Consequently, the LHA recommended refusal due to concerns over active travel strategy and pedestrian needs, particularly those with protected characteristics. End of August 2024 saw the LHA perform a 180-degree flip from refusal to acceptance. In seeking reasons, we submitted an FOI request which was refused. The LHA and the applicant contrived to propose an improved footpath 10 as an alternative access. This was subsequently dropped as it relied upon works on private property and failed the 6 tests. The LHA also stated that distances to bus stops were now clarified and considered to be acceptable. How? Door-to-door distances remain well in excess of recognised 400-metre limits. Reference is also placed upon another undeliverable formal footpath provision across private land to the south-east. Now, the LHA and the applicant propose another unenforceable condition to improve and use part of another privately owned footpath, FP15, at the extreme northern edge of the site. This is completely unsuitable for persons with protected characteristics, as you will have seen from your site visit. The LHA also propose a contrived solution for the transformation of Windsor Close cul-de-sac into a shared space through road between 2 conventional roads. There is no sound technical basis for this, as it can never comply with their Planning Streets and Places document, which shows footways for such a street. We are unaware of any precedent. This is not the applicant's submission, and a design to demonstrate a safe solution has not been submitted, despite this application seeking approval for access only. The LHA have also chosen to ignore issues regarding gradient and drainage in no-dig areas. The LHA has accepted incorrect documentation, ignored their own requests for information and promoted non-compliant and undeliverable proposals involving land not owned by the applicant with no sound technical basis. Please refuse this application on the grounds that compliance with NPPF and local and neighbourhood plans has not been demonstrated.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Coakley. Next is David Coakley, and then after that, Chris Robson.
Good evening, councillors. My name is David Coakley. I live in Maynell Rise, just off Manor Road. Before retiring, I was employed by the Health and Safety Executive as HM Principal Inspector of Health and Safety. I would like to address the road safety aspects of the application. Following our meeting with the Director of Place, LHA requested the applicant produce an RSA1 road safety audit. For clarity, you are being asked to approve both this document and the designer's response. It states that there have been 9 accidents with casualties within 1 kilometre of this site in the previous 18 months prior to the report. There are 2 safety aspects you need to be aware of. Firstly, the RSA1 is based on factually incorrect information. The applicant's transport statement and access junction layout falsely implies provision of footways and visibility displays in Windsor Close. This error has repeatedly been pointed out both to the LHA and the LPA case officer, but consistently ignored. This committee is being asked to approve documents containing these base errors. Secondly, auditors identified 4 problems that are likely to result in a significant road hazard. They are firstly, increased risk of shunt and head-on collisions from insufficient forward line of sight distance. Forward visibility issues have not been addressed. Secondly, the increased risk of collisions with pedestrians due to unclear road surface interfaces. This is also unaddressed. Thirdly, insufficient swept footpath provision may increase the risk of collisions between oncoming vehicles. This is unaddressed and the recommended local widening is not possible. The applicant disagreed and ignored this finding. Fourthly, insufficient water drainage may increase the risk of skidding type collisions. This is also unaddressed. Ignoring these points and accepting the RSA1 potentially leaves both the LHA and the LPA at risk of legal jeopardy. Consequently, we employed auditors to carry out an RSA1 based on correct inputs. These documents have been submitted to you. The LHA decided not to properly comment on these documents, despite being given the opportunity to do so. All we have had is cursory dismissal of valid concerns. I put it to the committee that this is not an acceptable state of affairs for such a safety critical matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Chris Robson and after that Ian Noakes.
Good evening. My name is Chris Robson from the Windsor Close Action Group, and I'm now going to speak to you regarding the use of reserved matters. This is an application where access is the only item being applied for, and yet there are unresolved issues of highway safety and pedestrian accessibility. Safe and suitable access is an absolute requirement at the outline stage. The officer's report defers all assessment to later stages and therefore does not comply with NPPF regarding safe and suitable access. The application submitted is not capable of approval. The information required to demonstrate it is either not available or not deliverable. In the latest highways submission of September 2025, to assess if there was a safe and suitable means of access, they stated they had considered the principal and detailed arrangements of vehicle and pedestrian access to the site. Despite this, critical issues relating to access have been left to reserve matters, including how localised widening can be achieved when there is no land available to do this, how there will be safe operation at the intersection of Windsor Close and Manor Road, how footpath 15, as the only footpath available to the scheme, will be made suitable for access. How is the design of transition features at each end of Windsor Close to be achieved to reduce the speed to 15 miles per hour? How forward visibility will be achieved, as the current plan is incorrect? How flush curb access can be possible without overrunning private property? Highways did not object, stating safe access can be delivered, but this cannot be assessed until all the above information is provided. Highways also stated that Windsor Close can be made a pedestrian prioritised street to comply with their planning streets and places. However, that document is clear that these types of streets must have footways of 2 metres each side, with low-rise curbs and footway material similar to the carriageway. None of this is possible in Windsor Close. Provision of a construction management plan is a condition, but we do not know how construction can be managed without danger to people and property. There is nothing to show how damage to Windsor Close private property can be avoided or compensated. The road is not suitable for construction or agricultural access. It is not acceptable to leave critical issues about safety and access to reserved matters in a planning application which is only for access. Safe and suitable access has not been and cannot be demonstrated. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian Noakes, followed by Ian Wilson.
Good evening, committee. My name is Ian Noakes and I live in Windsor Close. In October 2025, WCAG engaged Stomar Civil Engineering Consultants to undertake an independent review of technical highways issues with this application. I will now summarise this and related issues to you. This is an outline application, but not in relation to access. The review states matters related to the availability, design and safety of access cannot be left to reserved matters. Under NPPF paragraph 115, there must be safe and suitable access to the site for all users. This has not been achieved. Sustainable transport modes must be a priority, and this site is too far from public transport. This cannot be resolved. Under NPPF paragraph 117, applications must give priority to pedestrians and cyclists, address the needs of people with disabilities and reduced mobility, create places which are safe, secure and attractive, and minimise scope for conflict between pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles. This application does not meet those requirements. The LHA has not given an opinion, except to say vehicle access remains achievable, although it may require multiple manoeuvres. There is nothing to say how pedestrians or cyclists can be safe during these manoeuvres. On a construction site, such multiple manoeuvres would require a banksman by law. So why is this deemed acceptable in Windsor Close, a public highway? Stomar also concluded that visibility between vehicles will be a safety concern, particularly for existing residents entering and leaving driveways. This will be even more urgent with construction traffic. The LHA has made a construction management plan a condition, but Stomar points out there is no alternative access available, so the suitability of Windsor Close for construction traffic must be assessed before approval. The LHA proposed to change Windsor Close into a pedestrian prioritised street, but under their own design guidance, it should have 2-metre footway provision, which it does not. Stomar concludes that the scenario of Manor Road with 2-metre wide footways giving access to a shared surface environment along Windsor Close, which would then provide access back to a carriageway with 2-metre wide footways either side, appears to be a wholly contrived network in an attempt to seek to justify access. Finally, as a point of order, what the applicant said to you yesterday regarding service strips in Windsor Close was wrong. Residents' deeds do not state that the strips have to be kept clear at all times. Merely, unencumbered access has to be afforded. Hence, they are not a guarantee of forward visibility.
That's your time up.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, that was Mr. Noakes. Next, we've got Ian Wilson, followed by Leah Noakes.
Yes, I'm Ian Wilson, a retired NHS professional with experience of accessibility issues. I want to speak honestly as a local resident in Attleborough about the serious problems with disabled access in this proposal. The needs of people with disabilities and protected characteristics have been overlooked. The Derbyshire County Council Planning Streets and Places Manual says that the LHA takes its responsibilities for equality very seriously and knows that it is obliged through the Equality Act 2010 to have due regard to the needs of all persons. The site is steep, with the main proposed access being through Windsor Close, where there will be no footways and limited visibility. Highways rejected the plans at first because they didn't address the needs of pedestrians, and particularly those with protected characteristics. Then the applicant suggested an upgrade for less able pedestrians on footpath number 10 on the south side. That was dropped, but now there is the proposal to upgrade another privately owned path, footpath 15, between the highest point of the site and Atlow Brow. This is also unfit for purpose, as you may have seen visiting the site. I live in Atlow Brow, which drops down from the proposed footpath a 1 in 7 gradient, far steeper than the maximum of 1 in 12 recommended by the Equality Act and Act's Document M, and the recommended 1 in 20, which is even smoother than the LHA requires. For wheelchair users, controlling the rapid descent by hand friction is difficult and can be painful. You can imagine how hard it is going back up the hill, trying to propel a wheelchair up a 1 in 7. This cannot be recommended as an alternative for people with disabilities. I have two granddaughters in Manor Road, and they currently play in safety with friends in Windsor Close. One is profoundly deaf and cannot hear vehicles approaching from behind. Other children have neurodiverse problems and no sense of a danger and could run off without realising the consequences. Windsor Close is currently a safe environment for children because vehicles are slowing down to stop. This would change with through traffic, including delivery vans on timed schedules, agricultural vehicles, construction vehicles. With no footways in Windsor Close, wheelchair users are forced into the carriageway of a through road and now probably even over speed bumps with limited forward visibility. A wheelchair user, the head is only 4 feet above the ground, and this is below the height of the
Mr. Wilson,
windscreen
that's
of
your
a
time
van.
up.
Thank you, I'll stop
Okay,
there.
thank you. Next we have Leah Noakes. And the next speaker after that is Stephanie Sayers.
Good evening, I'm Leah Noakes. I live in Windsor Close. This field causes considerable surface water runoff flooding to neighbouring properties to the south. Many photos have been provided as evidence and objections, including very recently. Windsor Close Action Group commissioned a technical report on flooding from Stonewall Civil Engineering Consultants to independently validate the drainage proposal. This shows that the flow calculations and storage volumes are erroneous and risk further flooding of neighbouring properties. They do not take into account the flows from upstream fields or the footpath 15 surface water runoff. Stomar stated that the NPPF shows there should be a sequential test if the area is at risk of surface water flooding. It hasn't been performed, it hasn't been conditioned. The LLFA are aware of local property flooding and, like highways, they initially objected and have only withdrawn their objection based partly on information which was not put on the portal. Some of this was finally uploaded last week, although Asbury had received it in January last year. As a result, Stoma were not able to review it. Again, you're asked to approve submission based on outdated documents. On looking at what was uploaded last week, we cannot see how the new development could connect to the public foul sewer without digging up Windsor Close, although it's the only access to the site. Nor can we see how future highways drainage can be incorporated at the proposed access given the requirement for no dig. Again, the key points to do with flooding and drainage are in reserved matters and conditions, including the drainage system design, how surface water can be dealt with, management of runoff during construction, assessment of the condition of the proposed private outfalls, disposal of foul water, a whole life maintenance plan including the drains and private ownership because the council does not adopt such schemes. Contrary to the site visit discussions, there's no ditch inside the western boundary of the site. It's a route outside the site boundary, mainly culverted, and due to the ground levels, runoff from the site can't enter the watercourse. The drainage chamber in our garden only takes water from the north and footpath 15. The officer's report also states the applicant must obtain all information about land which is outside their control but is required for drainage, and the owners of the relevant land have already said in writing this approval will not be given. In flood risk and drainage terms, these are critical points and they make it impossible to know if this site is NPPF compliant or if it's a suitable site for development. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Stephanie Sayers, and after that, Barry Orme.
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Sayers. My property is on the corner of Windsor Close and Manor Road. Amenity. The NPPF approach to amenity is to set standards for living conditions and environmental quality. One of the core principles of NPPF 135 is to maintain a high standard of amenity. I note that the officer's report confirms that impact on residential amenity is a material planning issue. However, in considering the planning balance, it concludes that there are just two significant harms relating to the application: development outside the settlement boundary and loss of outlook for existing residents. This is totally inaccurate, as the report does not anywhere acknowledge the scope of the impact that this proposed development would have on Windsor Close, which goes far beyond just loss of outlook, and so should carry a much greater weight. The report implies that objections relate primarily to the impact on amenity that would be caused by the presence of houses in a site layout where there are currently green fields. It proposes that potential impact on neighbours should therefore be fully assessed at a later date. It cannot. In fact, the vast majority of objections refer to the impact on residential amenity within Windsor Close, with its conversion from a purpose-built short cul-de-sac to a through road. This conversion is a key element of proposals for access, including demolition of 4 Windsor Close, which would form the narrow vehicle entrance to the development site. For the residents of numbers 3 and 5, the impact on amenity would be particularly severe. With this change of use, the settings of these 2 properties would be radically transformed. An assessment of the full impact on amenity arising from arrangements for access cannot, therefore, be deferred. This change of use will result in a significant and permanent loss of amenity for all the residents of Windsor Close. The harm is not outweighed by the claimed benefits, and I ask the committee to refuse this application.
Next, we've got Barry Orme, followed by Glyn Bass.
Good evening. I'm Barry Orme and I live at the bungalow on 3 Windsor Close. You have received many detailed technical objections to this application. I wish to focus on the human impact. This is the second planning application for this site submitted since June 2023. It is causing a great deal of stress and anxiety, and at our ages, stress isn't just unpleasant, it's dangerous. Our quiet cul-de-sac of 4 bungalows and 4 houses was likely built with people like us in mind, older residents, some disabled, all hoping for a peaceful place to spend our final years. With one exception, we are all retired, some registered disabled, and with an average age of almost now 80. We are a community. We help each other with shopping, with lifts, with companionship. We have earned this calm after a lifetime of work. This proposed development has shattered that calm. The plans show footpaths to the close that do not and cannot exist. The plans also refer to the shared access of pedestrians and vehicles. The reality of this statement means that elderly, frail pedestrians are expected to share the road with cars, delivery vans, lorries, agricultural equipment. Not a great combination, especially for a 90-year-old. It is intended that the bungalow next to ours will be demolished to create the new site entrance. The blind corner created will mean that car headlights will shine directly into our bedroom window, which is close to the boundary. This is on top of the extra car noise and pollution, which will be made all the worse by the proposed speed calming hump directly again outside of our bedroom window. We and other residents also have serious concerns on our future ability to access the exit of our driveways due to the increased traffic and visibility issues. For example, I will have to reverse my car into a blind corner to exit my drive. Bear in mind some residents in the close rely on mobility scooters and walking aids with no footpaths, and with new through road generating more traffic, this will cause great harm and put us under great risk and is extremely dangerous. Please understand, we're not against progress. This is not progress, it's disruption, it's distress, and it's dangerous for all residents, especially the elderly, and will result in the undoing of our community.
Okay, that's your time up, Mr. Rose.
Thank you.
Glyn Bass, followed by Claire Horwood.
Good evening, my name is Glyn Bass from the Windsor Close Action Group. I want to raise some other issues. Regarding biodiversity net gain, concerns have been raised by Derbyshire Wildlife Trust and Natural England many times since 2024, most recently in December last year. The applicant's documents suggest there will be a diversity net loss. This is unacceptable in accordance with the NPPF and policy PD5. The officer's report leaves this to conditions, ignoring a Derbyshire Wildlife Trust statement that this should be resolved prior to determination. To be compliant, the development must be neutral or preferably deliver a net gain. The documents you are asked to formally approve are once again incorrect. They state that trees will be removed for health and safety reasons, which would mean bat surveys are compulsory. However, the case officer was later told by the applicant that trees will not be removed to avoid the need for surveys. This is not in the specific application document you are asked to approve. As a second issue, the NPPF requires that all reasonable future scenarios are taken into account in decision, and the development must function well, not just for the short term, but over the lifetime of the development. There are three other issues I'd like to raise. The increase in volume of traffic. The transport statement says there will be only an additional 15 trips in each peak hour. While this is already a lot for a small road, this number was based on old data from between 2014 and 2020, and from areas which have better access to public transport. We would expect it would be far more for this site, including deliveries, which have significantly increased since the pandemic and are expected to double again in the next 6 years. The transport statement also says the site would only create 3 pedestrian trips in a peak hour. The number must be far higher, as children will be walking to the primary and secondary school on the road during the peak hour. Increase in size of vehicles. Vehicles are a lot wider than they were, and are expected to continue to increase in width by 2% per year. This is even more with electric vehicles, which need side protection from impact due to their batteries. Vehicle weight is also increased by up to 35%, making a collision more dangerous.
Further, likelihood of further development on the site. Although not part of this application, further development on adjacent fields, which must also use Windsor Close for access, must be a reasonable future scenario.
Okay, thank you. Now we've got Claire Hallwood, followed by Patricia Lewis.
Good evening. My name is Claire Hallwood from the Windsor Close Action Group and I live on Ashbourne Green. I'm reading this speech on behalf of John Lidibley, the Chair of CPRE Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, the Campaign to Protect Rural England. CPRE supports plan-led sustainable development that meets genuine local need. But we also have a responsibility to protect valued landscapes, greenfield sites and environmental assets from inappropriate proposals. Having reviewed this application, we have 4 significant areas of concern about the suitability of this site for housing. Firstly, the principle of development. This site lies outside of Ashbourne's defined boundary and is not allocated for development in the adopted local plan. It is open greenfield pasture and developing it would represent encroachment on the countryside. Approving housing on unallocated land risks weakening the plan-led system and setting a precedent for further incremental loss of countryside. Secondary, flood risk and drainage. Although the site is classed as flood zone 1, its steep topography accelerates surface water runoff. Independent evidence shows that localised overland flooding already occurs. The proposed drainage strategy relies on outfalls on private land and infrastructure identified as being in poor condition. Sustainable drainage systems positioned on higher ground may not effectively control runoff. There is a real risk that this development could worsen flooding for neighbouring properties and downstream areas. In our view, this is a fundamental constraint that has not been resolved. Thirdly, landscape and countryside character. This is open countryside which contributes to the rural setting of Ashbourne. Incremental loss of such greenfield sites erodes landscape character and reduces environmental resilience at a time when national policy emphasises protection and enhancement of nature. Finally, sustainability and accessibility. While a bus stop is nearby, the steep gradient makes active travel difficult in practice. Technical assessments highlight this constraint. As a result, residents will be highly reliant on private car use, which conflicts with national and local policy objectives to reduce carbon emissions and promote sustainable transport. In conclusion, this proposal conflicts with key planning principles. It represents unjustified development in the countryside, raises unresolved flood risk concerns, harms landscape character and fails to demonstrate a sustainable location for new housing. For these reasons, CPRE, Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, did you have a point of order to raise, or are you just booking a slot?
Chair, I do have a point of order. On several occasions it's been referred to as an access, approval of access at outline planning state conditions at this stage. But I've noted, reading through the officer's report, reserve matters does not include drainage. Therefore, I believe that we're not only we would be approving the principle of access, and possibly some detailed design associated with access, but also the principle of drainage. And as there isn't sufficient information, and as that will be determined behind closed doors, I think we need to consider drainage at this stage as well as access. Thank you.
Okay, somebody like to answer that, or?
Yes, Chair. So drainage information has been submitted by the applicant. This is an outline application, so it is principally the principle of access and the principle of developing the site for 30 dwellings that is for consideration tonight. However, as part of that, the applicant, as one would expect, has provided an indicative site layout, indicative technical details on other matters, including in relation to drainage, because what they need to be able to do is to demonstrate that there is at least one possible way of addressing the site layout, the drainage, or various other planning considerations. That doesn't mean to say, though, that the final development will come forward in precise accordance with those details, because they are at a more basic level at this stage, and they're to demonstrate that it is possible. Those details have been obviously submitted to the lead local flood authority. They've considered them. They have confirmed that they meet the technical requirements, and accordingly they've raised no objection. But I believe there are planning conditions that can that will address any pick up any detailed matters of design, and if the committee was minded to require further conditions, then that can be accommodated as well.
It's that we've had this situation before where we've approved something on access and then found that we were also approving the principle of drainage, and then when it came to reserved matters we were not allowed to discuss drainage, and the scheme went through without full review of the drainage plan that was prepared, which included a big hole, which meant that they are now having to go back and reconsider how they did drainage. So can I suggest that whatever we do here, what we have to do is ensure that if this goes through at outline, then we allow reserved matters consideration of the drainage plans, and we would insist on a thorough drainage plan being included in the reserved matters application and tested at committee.
I presume that's possible in the way we word the motion. If we, yeah. Well,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Patricia Lewis, and after that, Patricia de Felice.
Good evening. I'm Patricia Lewis from Windsor Close Action Group, and I am now going to read a letter sent by the Derbyshire Police and Crime Commissioner to Paul Wilson, the Chief Executive of Derbyshire Dales District Council, and Steve Capes, the Director of Place and Economy, Derbyshire Dales District Council, in relation to this application on the 14th of April 2025. The site visit took place on Thursday, the 3rd of April, at 15:30 hours, with Mr Hernandez from DCC Planning in attendance. The visit was in relation to the proposed housing development of 30 houses, which involves the demolition of an existing house to create a through road in what is currently a cul-de-sac. The key concerns is traffic increase near schools. The development will significantly increase traffic at a junction close to 3 main educational institutions: Parkside Junior School, Queen Elizabeth Grammar School and Ashbourne Sixth Form Centre. This raises substantial safety concerns, particularly as students frequently cross Green Road throughout the day. Shared space and footpath issues. The new application designates Windsor Close as a safe or shared space, expecting pedestrians and vehicles to interact without separation. This is problematic as the developer is legally obligated to provide a footpath for people with protected characteristics. The proposed use of a public right-of-way behind some houses on Windsor Close is inadequate, as part of it is privately owned. This does not address the need for a footpath for both new development residents and existing Windsor Close residents with protected characteristics. And 3, the agricultural access concerns. The recommendation to close the existing agricultural access from Green Road B5035 to the proposed site due to concerns over pedestrian and vehicular interaction and redirect all agricultural traffic through Windsor Close is concerning. This would increase the interaction between pedestrians and agricultural traffic for current residents, exasperating safety issues at the junction of Greenway and Green Road near the schools. I do appreciate all the effort that has gone into this proposed development. I understand that previous applications were turned down due to safety concerns, and following the recent site visit, Stephen Hughes, Traffic Management Officer, having identified 3 crucial safety issues that still need to be addressed. Many residents remain anxious about these unresolved concerns, especially regarding the safety of children and families. and I generally believe we have a wonderful opportunity to collaborate positively and constructively to find solutions that everyone can feel confident in. Therefore, I urge you to work with residents and Derbyshire Constabulary.
That's your time up.
To find. Thank you so much for taking the time to consider this. I'd really welcome. And then.
No, that's your time up. I'm going to have to.
But neither Mr. Wilson or Mr. Capes ever replied to the Police Crime Commissioner. Just wanted to get that bit in. I'm sorry.
Patricia de Felice.
I'm Patricia De Felici and I live on Windsor Close. I'm representing Mr. John Whitby, who is in Parliament so cannot attend in person. He asked for the following to be read out on his behalf. I would like to make clear my opposition to the proposed house building development affecting Windsor Close, Ashbourne, Derbyshire Dales District Council Planning Application Ref 24/00097/OUT. I've had the opportunity to visit Windsor Close and hear from residents, and I have no doubt that the development proposed would be disruptive to the character of the residential cul-de-sac, harming the visual amenity and residential environment. Additionally, pressures on local parking capacity would also have an impact on the safety and convenience for existing residents of the Close, and the information I have seen for proposed layout does not satisfy the concerns of locals or myself. I have also seen how Windsor Close and the nearby roads have limited capacity to accommodate the additional vehicle movements that would be generated by this development, including the substantial fact that there are no footways located in the cul-de-sac and no space for ones to be constructed due to residents owning the unadopted 2-metre fronts of their gardens and or drives up to the road's curb line. It appears to me this would create an extremely serious potential risks for pedestrian and highway safety, on top of the challenges for emergency services access and servicing and refuse collection. Many residents also have protected characteristics, and I have heard from them regarding the additional pressures and stress that this development would create in their daily lives. There are also significant concerns regarding the impact on nature and biodiversity, specifically the mature ash tree near Windsor Close, which was given a tree preservation order in August 25, raising questions about the possibility of the proposed development to threaten or disrupt landscape features and established trees and habitats which contribute to the local character. I believe the level of sustained objection from residents also reflects significant and widespread concern about the impacts on highways, amenity, and the character of the area, and it should be treated as a serious material consideration in assessing whether this development is acceptable. Mr. John Whitby, MP, Member of Parliament for Derbyshire Dales.
Thank you. Next we have Mark McGowan and after that Councillor Dobbs.
Good evening. My name is Mark McGowan from the Windsor Close Action Group, and I'm now going to read a statement provided by Mr. Nick Adams. As the Councillor for Dovedale and Ashbourne North, I object to this planning application on several grounds. Vehicle access. Windsor Close was originally designed as a residential cul-de-sac. It is unsuitable for access for the construction traffic and additional residential occupation. It was never designed for use as a thoroughfare for agricultural and commercial traffic servicing a housing estate. I agree with the submission from Stephen Hawley of DCC Highways dated 29th of February 2024, where he objected to this proposal due to not addressing the needs of pedestrians. Pedestrian access. It is not acceptable to expect pedestrians from the development and residents of Windsor Close to share the road space with vehicles. This is particularly relevant to people with protected characteristics. Design. This application has been in the system for years. There still seems to be no clarity about the design and how pedestrians are to be kept safe. I understand the principle of shared space is now discredited. Allowing a large planning application requiring a completely inappropriate access route is unacceptable. Drainage. Surface water flooding is already an issue in this area and risks would be increased if the development was allowed. Location. The proposed site is outside of the settlement boundary and therefore should be considered as development in the countryside. I have further general comments. Ashbourne has and is experiencing considerable new development with further developments on the way. Individual developments may not be considered to impact infrastructure, but the cumulative effect is overwhelming existing resources. The impetus for development is not driven by local demand. Business and employment opportunities need to be increased to avoid Ashbourne becoming a commuter dormitory, placing increased strain on transport links. Much is made of encouraging active travel, but the reality is that most households will have and use 2 cars. More work needs to be done to ensure that development is sustainable and reduces car dependency, and I recommend that the committee refuses its application. Thank you.
Okay, so we've now got Councillor Dobbs, who has 5 minutes, and finally after that we have Adam Rutland, the applicant, who will also have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, you've heard the numerous significant and well-founded concerns of local residents about this development and access in particular. Perhaps when you first saw Windsor Close, either on the site visit or on Google Street View, and reflected that this was the proposed route to a significant housing development, you had the same concerns. I suggest that this application before you this evening contains fundamental matters that are either unspecified, unsafe or undeliverable. These limitations are emphatically not something that can be left to the reserve matters stage, since they are so serious. Focusing for the moment on the use of Windsor Close as an access, you will have heard how a basic error over the ownership of the service strips allowed the applicant to assume that pedestrian footways were possible together with road realignment. This is undeliverable. Similarly, footpaths at both the northwest and southeast corners of the site to allow pedestrian access to footpath 15 and the B5035 respectively are probably undeliverable due to land ownership. And I refer members to the letter from Irwin Mitchell, which I believe you have in front of you and is actually on the portal since last year. The whole sequence of suggestions over how to create safe routes for pedestrians does reveal a level of determination to make it fit no matter what. First we had footpath 10 as the key route, then footpath 15 was added, which creates, as you've heard, a very long and steep alternative, and now footpath 10 has been dropped. The suggestion that Windsor Close be reclassified as a pedestrian prioritised street is one that makes no sense, even if it met the Highways Authority technical requirements, which it doesn't. This repurposing of something for a use beyond its design capacity is a dangerous strategy. The idea that residents of this currently quiet cul-de-sac are required to accept that they have no choice but to do battle with traffic from 30 homes appearing around a blind bend between 2 trees seems to me to be totally unacceptable because it is unsafe. At present, residents manage without footpaths, since from any point in the close they have full visibility of driveways and car movements. As is self-evident, people will only choose to walk if it is safe to do so, and the proposals will only increase reliance on the car. During the construction phase, the report seems to dismiss any concerns over large vehicles using the close for access. Yet what is inevitable with a narrow road is that any visitors to the close will not be able to park in the road for fear of blocking it. This is a serious loss of amenity. This outline application expressly deals with access, and it must therefore be shown at outline stage that access is safe and capable of being achieved in principle. It cannot and must not be left to the reserve matters stage. To move to the concerns about surface water runoff, it seems extraordinary to read in 7.7.5 of the officer report that one observation in January 2025 made on behalf of the applicant appears to be regarded as a sufficient rebuttal to all the photographic and consultant evidence from the action group showing that surface water flowing from this site currently creates problems. In particular, the Stonemore report reveals the numerous problems with the applicant's flood risk assessment, and yet receives just 2 mentions in the officer report, focusing almost solely on the collapsed private drain. It is the evidence from Stonemore that underlines the engineering challenge that remains unanswered by the applicant. The condition from the LLFA about the capacity of the suggested discharge system is characteristic of the whole application. It is in effect saying, we would like this to work, but we aren't worrying at this stage about if it is even possible to make that happen. The so-called strategy for taking the water off-site, where one drain has collapsed and the other has an unknown route, would appear to be another example of attempting to repurpose infrastructure beyond its design capacity. I hope I've convinced members that there is too much that is unspecified, unsafe, or undeliverable in this application. The serious matters that have been highlighted by residents cannot and must not be left unaddressed at this outline stage, and therefore refusal is the only appropriate course of action. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dobbs. Finally, we have Adam Rutland, the applicant. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening. I'd like to explain the journey that has brought us to this point. All policies that support this proposal are set out in Section 7 of the Officer's report, which the committee will be already well versed in. I'll focus on the collaborative efforts that have shaped the recommended scheme before you today. The original application for 42 dwellings was discussed with the then planning officer, Mr Whitmore. He recommended it would be better if it were less dense, representative of an edge of town development, but otherwise sound. On his advice, we withdrew that application and resubmitted the current outline proposal with a layout that better complements the surroundings, that could support a good mix of housing, including bungalows. Despite several further changes in planning officer, the overall layout and feel has remained, and supported by all the statutory consultees. Highways did initially confirm that the carriageway and service strips on Windsor Close were adopted. However, this was questioned, so we have proceeded as though they are not adopted. That said, the legal covenants requiring these strips to remain clear, unplanted and accessible for future works remain robustly in place. We've worked constructively with Highways to present a scheme that reflects the character of the area, provides alternative access for other road users, introduces a street layout that calms traffic, and crucially, includes a compliant turning head to eliminate the currently very unsafe practice of refuse lorries reversing down Windsor Close. There have been numerous studies, including a WSHR, Level 1 RSA, and even a visit from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office. And still, the existing road width and shared space is supported by Highways as it reduces speed. We will continue to collaborate with Highways to discharge conditions, which could include parking restrictions around junctions, etc., via Section 106, for example. The officer report concludes that there are no justifiable grounds on which an objection could be maintained. I share the concerns of residents regarding the traffic and parking around the schools. It was an issue even when I was there in the 80s. However, this site is just 350 metres from Quakes and 600 from Parkside School. It is reasonable to expect that many pupils living here would walk to school, something I'm sure this committee is keen to promote and will be far less likely with developments further afield. I know the flooding is always an area of concern for this committee. There are no requirements on landowners per se to improve drainage, whatever the climate decides to do. We've had very constructive on and off-site dialogue with the LLFA to ensure a robust and climate-resilient drainage strategy, including 2 proven discharge points with documented routes to the Henmore, attenuation on site to better the current Q-bar rate, including allowances for 10% urban creep and 40% climate change. Furthermore, we have demonstrated the attenuation could reduce the rate from the current 8.1 to 3.4 litres a second. In other words, this scheme could more than halve the current rate from the developed area to a level that can be managed by either one of the 2 discharge points on their own. Please remember the layout is indicative, as the drainage is a reserved matter, and the final scheme will be subject to further approval. As can be seen by the shape of the extended cul-de-sac, we have been keen from the outset to preserve the natural environment. No trees have or will be felled. We've provided additional reports to show how we will protect trees. We will install bird boxes, bike storage, EV charging points and solar PV panels, and delivering biodiversity net gain on site or within the blue line boundary, all while supporting the affordable housing requirements. I'm not a professional developer, I'm a local lad, and it's been a steep learning curve. But together, we've developed a conscientious, collaborative proposal working with all the statutory consultees to provide you with as much detail as possible to support the officer's recommendation in front of you tonight. I've yet to see an outline planning application that's had so much scrutiny. However, this has resulted in greater collaboration and consequently cemented statutory consultee support. The current government has made it clear that more housing is coming. The question is, do we want that growth to be organic, modest and integrated into our communities, or imposed at scale by national developers? I hope that this committee will retain its powers and continue its good work protecting the nature and uniqueness of the towns and villages of the Derbyshire Dales. My fear is that proposals like this, which offer organic, sympathetically sized development that allow people to integrate with the existing communities, are refused, then this will simply encourage national companies to force through developments of several hundred anywhere-style houses, using their financial clout to override local characteristics, leading to communities detached from the established settlements, threatening the very nature, feel and especially the traditions of our beloved Dales. This site is already bordered on 3 sites by development. It does not lie in the natural path of Shrovetide. It offers environmental benefits, solutions to existing problems and proximity to local amenities. So if not here, then where? Finally, I want to thank everyone involved, including the residents. I've read every comment submitted. Whilst we may not agree on everything, the dialogue has always been respectful, constructive and sometimes passionate, befitting the people of Ashbourne. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Okay, can we have our officer report now, please? Sorry, I need to draw your attention, before we have the officer report, I need to draw your attention to the late representations, which should be on your tables in front of you and were emailed to you about 3:45 this afternoon. Shall we take a few minutes to read through those? I'm sure most of you will have read part of it already, but we'll take a few minutes to read the late representations. Okay. I think we can go to questions now. We will probably have a short break after questions, so you will be able to finish if you haven't. Oh, sorry, yes. Sorry, what I meant was, we're going to come back to the officer's report now. Yes. Yeah. Then we'll have questions. Then we'll have a short break after questions. So if you haven't finished reading all of those late representations, you can do that then, is what I was trying to say. Okay, so can we have the officer's report now, please?
Good evening, Chair and members. The application is a resubmission of an earlier application, and this is for 42 dwellings, and this is now down to 30 dwellings. The site is a 1.65 hectare parcel of land. As you can see on the slide, the application site is in red, and the land in blue denotes land in their ownership. That is not part of the application. You're just determining the layout, the access, and an indicative layout has been provided. Next slide. That's just a zoomed in version so you can clear on what is the application site. The next slide. This shows you in context with the neighbourhood plan and the settlement boundary. The star denotes the application site. So as you can see, it's clearly outside of the settlement boundary for Ashbourne. The next slide is showing the public rights of ways. Again, the star is denoting the access, and that's the application site. FP15 is to the north and FP10 is to the south. I've pointed them out because they are referred to in the reports, and we'll go through them a bit later on. The next slide is showing you locations of photographs that were taken during a site visit, and shows you various views across the site. Next slide. This slide is taken from Atlow Brow FP15. So there's two views there, one looking further to the south, to the east, and one looking further down the site. As you can see, there is a slope running down the site. Drainage, people have raised this already, that the drainage does run slowly along that, facilitated by the topography. The next slide is from Atlow Brow, from the footprint, from the public rights of way. You can see the access track that leads around the site. The next slide. This is your notes on the photo, the ends of the adopted part of the public right of way, which is denoted by that tarmac, and then it goes into an unmade surface. It is proposed to connect there at that point to make the connection from the layout as shown as indicative. The next photograph is showing, this is taken at the entrance on Manor Road, showing you the entrance to Windsor Close. The next slide is taken from in a vehicle showing driving up Windsor Close. The next slide just pans around further in just to show you the turning heads that are there at the moment. The bungalow at the top, number 4, is to be removed, to be demolished to make way for the access. You can see the ash tree behind, which is denoted as tree 11, which now has a TPO on it. The next slide. This is taken from Manor Road, which is a private road. I was taken from the Green Hill Road, isn't it?
The Green Road.
Yeah, the Green Road.
That's the track across the green.
Yeah, the Green Road, which has also been raised as being part of the common land around this area. Footpath 10 is access from. Footpath 10 runs along to the south, to the west of that site. The next slide is the indicative layout plan that's shown one possible arrangement of dwellings around a single point, a spinal road with a single point of access off Windsor Close. The next slide. Due to the topography of the site, during the consultation responses with Highways, it was commented that they needed to show that they could get a walkable solution on the site. So this was provided to show a possible arrangement and to show the topography, horizontal and vertical gradients, to show that an engineer's solution could be achieved on site. The next slide shows you the carriage widths and the gradients so that the slopes that can be taken. HA did raise concerns over the gradients, that's why these were requested, although they're not part of the consideration today because layout is a reserved matter. A road safety audit was carried out by request of the Highways Authority and a walking, cycle, horse riding assessment. The conclusions in both have been accepted. The next slide just show you the root protection zone. The tree, as a TPO tree, the access is the layout as shown on the indicative plan clips the root protection zone by 20%. So to protect the tree, discussions have been had around a no-dig solution to the tree and possible use of a cell web solution which protects the root protection zone. This is again a zoomed up version to just show you the root protection zone and the part of it. This isn't in the access, I must point that out. This is part of the layout, but we needed to be certain that there was a solution available should the committee approve the proposal. Details of the cell web are conditioned as part of the reserve matters, as are details on the pedestrianised streets situation. Moving to the principle of the development, the council currently has a 1.36-year housing land supply, well below the 5-year requirement. This does engage the NPPF tilted balance, which you'll all be familiar with. Local Plan Policy S4 allows for housing adjacent to the Tier 1 settlements in absence of a 5-year housing land supply. Ashbourne is a Tier 1 settlement. As shown on the earlier slides, the site is adjacent to the settlement. The principle of housing on the site is therefore accepted, subject to further assessment of the policies within the local plan. And I'll just move on to some of these now. Access and highway safety. As you're aware, substantial objection has come forward from residents of and the Windsor Close Action Group have provided independent highway reports, contesting that a suitable and safe pedestrian access can be provided. The report has been reviewed by the Highways Authority, who maintain that the proposal would not amount to severe harm and raise no objection to the proposals, subject to conditions as outlined in the committee report.
Please, sorry, can we just pause the report a second there? We can't continue if people are going to keep calling out like this. This is not really okay. We all listen to you speaking. Please, will you listen silently? Thank you.
I'll just repeat that. The Highways Authority maintain the proposal would not amount to a severe harm and raise no objection to the proposals, subject to conditions as outlined in the committee report. The trip generation is modest at around 15 two-way movements at AM and PM peaks. This does not trigger the severe residual impact in MPPF Para 116. The Highways Authority are satisfied that Windsor Close can function as a pedestrian prioritised street, keeping traffic speeds low. The target is 15 miles per hour. It is advised that this matches existing behaviour on the cul-de-sac. Condition 5 in the report requires the details to be provided. A new pedestrian link to the FP provides an alternate safe walking route. This is not its only walking route, it's to provide connectivity to recreational out into the countryside. It doesn't mean that people have to use it. A Grampian-style condition can be imposed to require improvements to that footpath 15, and that's proposed at condition 6. The internal layout will be subject to a further review with a reserve matters application. The local Highways Authority is satisfied there is an engineer solution available and there is no justifiable reason to seek further detail at this outline stage. Trees and the TPO. The ash tree at the entry is now a confirmed TPO. Concerns have been raised with residents of the potential loss of tree as a result of the development and creation of the access. Whilst there is some encroachment in the root protection area and no dig construction methods at the minute, cell web has been proposed. Highways accept that retention is possible in principle, but advise that a technical construction details must be provided at the reserve matter stage, and that's condition 7 and 11. All trees on the site are to be retained, and that's condition 17. Flood risk and drainage. The site lies in flood zone 1, a low probability of flooding. The EA raised no objection, and there is no requirement to do a sequential test of the site. Ground levels are ranging from approximately 175.5 AOD in the northeast corner, falling steeply to 152.9 metres in the southwest. This is approximate equivalent to a gradient of 1 in 10 across the site. The Windsor Close Action Group commissioned an independent report detailing existing drainage and pooling issues on the site and to neighbouring properties, noting 3 James Court, which is on lower land levels. Considering that the proposed drainage of the site is inadequate. The report includes photographs of neighbouring properties during a flood event showing water runoff from fields spilling over retaining walls onto the garden. Whilst these are not dated, it is stated that it happens after the construction of the field trap bund, which was installed to manage surface water runoff, approximately 2019. The application is seeking outline consent only, with all matters reserved. However, policy requires proposed to address any potential flood risk as a result of development. It's legitimate to consider drainage issues. The outline drainage design, as contained in the flood risk assessment, consists of 3 times 70 square metre ponds at a mid-high point of the site, a 2 to 6 metre square meal swaled rail. So I'm just and 331 square metres attenuation pond at the bottom of the site, totalling 567 square metres. Requirement to the Greenfield runoff rate. The Lead Local Flood Authority initially issued a holding objection, but following further drainage investigations and field surveys undertaken during heavy rainfall, the Lead Local Flood Authority raised no objection, subject to conditions 13, 14, 15, requiring a full drainage scheme to be submitted with the reserved matters application. Ecology and biodiversity. Objections have been received by residents citing loss of wildlife, impact upon bats. Derbyshire Wildlife Trust initially requested further bat surveys, but once the applicant committed to no tree removal, Derbyshire Wildlife Trust withdrew their objection. Condition 17 prevents any tree removal unless prior consent is required. A bat survey would also be required if any of the trees are to be removed. The application was submitted prior to the mandatory requirement to provide biodiversity net gains, but there is a policy requirement to provide at least a 10% net gain, and this can be secured at the reserved matter stage by a biodiversity retention and enhancement plan. That's at condition 22. Residential amenity. Manor Lodge and Manor Barn to the east have an outlook over the fields. At outline stage, the indicative layout shows that acceptable separation distance and avoidance of overshadowing can be achieved. It is accepted that residents on Windsor Close will have a change in environment from a cul-de-sac to an extended cul-de-sac. Heritage. The site is not within a conservation area and no harm to statutory heritage assets has been identified. The Conservation Office has identified some minor impact to the setting of Manor Farm as a non-designated asset, but this is less than substantial and outweighed by the significant public benefit, particularly in housing delivery. To mitigate impact on services, developer contributions have been requested through a legal section 106. 30% affordable housing equivalates to 9 units. There's 4,383 to go towards the Park and Gardens contribution and 1,773 allotments contribution, and then there is the required 2% monetary fee. Management and maintenance of open space and biodiversity areas for 30 years, but this is not going to be a requirement because it's pre-mandatory biodiversity. So on the planning Banson and the recommendation, the council's 1.36 year supply means very significant weight is given to housing delivery. The site is adjacent to the settlements in a location acceptable under policy S4. Highways, Lead Local Flood Authority, Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, Natural England and Environmental Health raise no objections. The landscape harm is considered to be moderate and can be mitigated by an enhanced landscape. It is noted that the landscape character is of low quality. There's no clear reasons for refusal under the MPPF footnote 7, which requires us to, which would disengage the tilted balance. The adverse impacts do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and accordingly the recommendation is one to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that report. I think, so given that it's now 7:30, I think in a slight change of plan, we will have a 5-minute comfort break now. That will also allow any councillors who haven't finished reading the late representations to finish reading that. But we will only be 5 minutes, okay? So we're adjourning for 5 minutes. Okay, that's been 5 minutes. Can everybody return to their seats as quickly as possible? Councillors are all in place, aren't they? Okay, can I, before we resume, I'd just like to remind members of the public that you are welcome to view the meeting, but you do not have to be in this room. Any shouting or disruption will mean that you have to go and sit next door and watch it on a screen instead, because it is disruptive and could be said to be putting disproportionate pressure on councillors. It's really important that the councillors here get to make their decision, our decision, without any disruption. Okay? Anyway, saying that, do we have any questions? Councillor Linthwaite.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, if I have any more questions as they occur to me, can I come back? I have written quite a few down. Would that be all right?
Well, given that it's already 7:30.
Okay, I'll be as brief as I can. Yeah. No,
It's normally 3 questions each, but if you wait till the end, somebody else might ask your questions.
Yes, yeah, okay. The first thing I wanted to just ask, well, really comment as well, really, is under the, it was section 7.5.15, page 37 of the officer's report, regarding Windsor Close and its suitability for turning a cul-de-sac into a through road, an extended cul-de-sac, if you like, regarding 100, it's okay if you've got less than 100 vehicle movements per hour at peak times, and a road width of 4.1 to 6.2 metres. I understand that, yeah. I have to be honest, I was completely shocked by that, because 4.1 metres is really not very far, and I appreciate that Windsor Close is slightly bigger than that. My question really is regarding parking. One or two people have mentioned the loss of amenity of parking. Now, it's 43 years since I passed my driving test in Ashbourne, and I have to confess, I went back to the, what's it called?
Test centre.
No, the rules book, whatever the rule book's called. Thank you. Thank you. This happens to me a lot. And looking at the highway code, you can't park less than 32 feet or 10 metres from a junction. Well, there were quite a lot of cars parked yesterday when we were visiting that were considerably closer than that. It also mentions that you can't park by the curbside if to do so would prevent access to emergency services. Well, given the width of Windsor Close, it would seem almost that it's impossible to park on the street in Windsor Close legally. I just wondered if the gentleman from Highways had a comment to make on that, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I think the Highway Code gives you guidance on what's allowable, what's not. In highway law, any parking constitutes an obstruction to the highway, so any parking on the highway, potentially, if it's obstructive, is illegal. I think the situation on Windsor Close changes from time to time, from day to day, from hour to hour, and you will see variations in on-street parking demands along Windsor Close. Certainly from what the Highway Authority have seen, we have seen roadside parking on Windsor Close. We're conscious of that, but the widths that you referred to, the 4.1 metre width, is a standard carriageway width for pedestrian prioritised streets. It does allow 2 vehicles to pass in opposite directions. It allows, obviously, a vehicle to pass a parked vehicle within the space available. The question is whether you've got a significant impact and significant conflict between vehicles heading in opposite directions that couldn't be accommodated where there's an obstruction. That's the real issue. And that's why the 100 vehicle per hour threshold is set, because that gives you a level of traffic flow that is capable of being accommodated without significant conflict and congestion on a road which is subject to a constrained width.
Okay, thank you. And really a follow-up question regarding, it was page 38, 7.5.22 and 23. Minor localised widenings should be provided to ensure safe two-way operation. I was wondering how that might be envisaged, given that the 2 metre service strip. I didn't quite understand how that would work.
Which reference?
Sorry, page 38
Yep.
of the officer's report, section 7.5, 22 and 23. It's regarding the safe two-way operation. It says minor localised widening should be provided, and I wasn't sure how that could be accommodated given
Yeah, I think
the service strip.
What's intended there, that reference I think refers to the on-site layout, where
Oh,
you've got
okay.
tight radius bent
So not
on,
Windsor Close itself?
Not on Windsor Close, no.
I beg your pardon. Yeah, okay, thank you. And my third question, so that's probably for Denise, is to do with where water goes into a suds and you have your hydro brake and it then leaves the suds at a slow rate. If that water goes into a water course that under riparian rules belongs to somebody else, does the owner of the land with the suds on it, do they have to get permission from the people with riparian rights in order to discharge into their water course?
Yes, if they need to be breaking into someone else's land who is a riparian owner, but what's being proposed here is discharging and connecting into water courses where the applicant's the riparian owner on the application site, which then it will travel down and discharge, and they would carry that on as it goes down the line, like you do your sewers, it carries on and then discharges in. But yes, if they needed to go onto someone else's land, then they would need to get consent for that, and if it's not given, then they have to find an alternative.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Hughes, you're next.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. The first is about, following on from that point, there's a water course which runs down through the back gardens of the Windsor Close residents and ends up in a culvert at the end in number 5's back garden. Is that the water course that will be used by the developer to discharge water from the site?
The detailed design hasn't been drawn up yet, but there's been some correspondence which is available on the website, and it shows all the different water courses and where possible discharge is. So, but the detailed design is part of the condition because it's not drawn up yet because the applications for up to 30 dwellings, they could be less, and that changes the nature of how water is stored and a different attenuation. So the details comes in the reserved matters, but they have shown different water courses and possible connection routes, but nothing has been firmed up.
If the water course is in the back garden of somebody else's property, it's the other side of the hedge, then surely there's it has to be a Grampian condition. And indeed the condition number 6, I think it is, mentions that no development can take place until a suitable drainage scheme has been established. And I'm wondering whether, if say number 5 will not allow access to their back garden to put in a suitable drainage system connecting to their culvert, what does that do for the development?
Then they have to find an alternate way of dealing with the surface water drainage on site.
So given that this is a Grampian condition, and the principle of drainage is conditional on the actually fulfilment of that Grampian condition. And I submit that as a result, there is no principle of drainage to be approved in this case. And whatever we do at this meeting, the principle of drainage has not been established.
Correct. It's part of the detailed design stage when they design the housing and the layout.
So
if the Grampian condition can't be met, then they can't do. Then there needs to be a variation of the condition because they won't be able to meet it.
So does that affect the viability of the housing development? That if we cannot guarantee that sewage and surface water runoff anyway cannot be suitably taken off the site, because there is no the proposal put forward has a big hole in it, namely a Grampian condition. Doesn't that say something about the viability of the site as for development?
Just familiarise myself with the things.
Chair, with your permission, I can come in on that point. So the lead local flood authority have looked at the information that has been submitted. They've confirmed in writing that they're content the calculations have been undertaken using standard industry practice, that there is sufficient room on site for the required volume of attenuation to discharge at the appropriate greenfield runoff rate, and should the application progress, a detailed design accommodated by hydraulic calculations will be provided to demonstrate the surface water system works. They've confirmed that the applicant is connecting to a watercourse within their land, which is within their right as a riparian landowner, and downstream landowners, in line with guidance, should accept the flow of the watercourse and pass it on. So there's been as much information that is reasonable to expect to be submitted in what is an outline application, to give that assurance that the appropriate measures can be put in place. But as a safeguard, there is the Grampian condition, and like with any Grampian condition, if it can't be complied with, then the development can't go ahead. So that's the safeguard.
So which is the drainage, the outflow that would be under the control of the applicant, and runs through to another drainage system outside the development area?
Unfortunately, we don't have on these slides the diagram of the indicative.
Well, the one I saw, which is in Claire Robbins' paper, which was put on the website on the 13th, shows a red line going down the western boundary within a green area, which is outside at the back gardens, not in the back gardens of the Windsor Close residents. Yet I suggest that diagram is wrong, because the drainage ditch, which carries water from footpath 15, goes down in the back gardens and behind the hedge in the back gardens of the residents of Windsor Close, and therefore it is not under the control of the applicant, and therefore there's a Grampian condition to actually put water into that, surface water into that from the site, and therefore the drainage system does not actually work in the way that it's suggested in Claire Robbins', I think it is, document which is put on the site on the 13th. So I suggest there's a fault in that document which leads us to an erroneous conclusion. I would say that it's a bit unfortunate that document went on there only 11 days before this meeting, giving residents no opportunity to test that document against their own knowledge. So I'm doing that now because I see that there is a possible problem with that document.
As I say, I can only go on the advice of the lead local flood authority. I'm not a flood
okay, so in that case, Chair,
myself.
I suggest that we cannot continue with this meeting, because we do not know whether the document that has been put before us is accurate, and therefore I suggest that we defer this meeting until we have an accurate assessment of the possible drainage systems and some agreed strategy for drainage from this site, because without that we cannot demonstrate viability of this particular development. And I move that we therefore defer, and I look for a second on those grounds.
Okay.
I've moved a deferment.
Yes, I'm aware of
those
that.
grounds.
Before we vote on that, I'd like to get some legal opinion on that suggestion. Okay, so we need to have an adjournment before we can have a legal opinion on that.
Thank you.
So we'll have an adjournment for probably 5 minutes-ish. Is that enough? Okay. Yeah,
Could I ask that the legal advice also covers the question of if we do defer on that basis, how we ensure that we are not then deemed to have agreed everything else that's before us today?
Okay, yeah. Okay. And Councillor Murphy, were you going to second the motion? Oh, okay, yeah. We'll come back in a minute. Okay. Okay, we are now adjourned while we clarify the legal position on this. Thank you for your patience, everyone. We have discussed this. I'm going to hand over to Chris Dale, who's going to explain the position, and then we'll have an update from Kerry as well.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm really just elaborating on what I said earlier, but the conditions relating to drainage are set out in conditions 12 to 15 of the report. They say that the development shall not be commenced, that's condition 12, until information on drainage has been submitted. Condition 13 and 14 and 15 say similar things. They either say prior to commencement of development or no development shall take place until this information has been submitted. So what I'm trying to say is that if planning permission were granted tonight, those conditions, if the planning permission, if those conditions cannot be complied with, then the planning permission cannot be implemented. I think I'm probably repeating myself, so I'll stop at that point and defer to my colleague.
Through you, Chair. Good evening, members. I was just asked the question about specifically about a deferral, and that is obviously an option for members tonight to defer. What I would say is if you are deferring, you need to be very, very clear in what terms you are deferring on and what you are expecting the applicant to do in that period of a deferral. As Chris explained, that there are a number of conditions that the applicant is required to comply with, and expecting the applicant to comply with those conditions as a mean of the deferral might not be seen as in, would meet the tests of the reasons for a deferral. So that I mean, members are, it is your decision. I'm just here to help and guide you, whichever decision that you do make. Yes, Karen.
Can I come back then?
Yeah.
So my reason for deferral is that the applicant cannot demonstrate that they have access to a watercourse under their control that will allow the site to be drained into a suitable into a suitable hierarchy, so drainage hierarchy. So the proposal, as I understand it, is that the water from the west side, surface water from the western side of the site, would be drained through a suds into the drainage ditch running through the back gardens of Windsor Close residents, and then into a culvert built by the resident in number 5, Windsor Close. Now, if that's the case, there's a Grampian condition. The development is subject to a Grampian condition, I believe, and therefore the applicant cannot demonstrate that they have a viable solution for draining the site. Now, to approve something at outline, when the developer does not know where the water from the site is going to go, seems to be foolhardy, can I say. And therefore, it's important that we understand where the water is going to go. This isn't about the detailed design of the drainage system on site. It's about how the drainage system on site connects into the drainage hierarchy.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. There's a lot of technical detail in your assessment there, which I do. My expertise are not in those full detail. But the second point of what I was going to say is, if members are also minded to defer, then we don't have an extension of time, which our extension of time with the applicant expired on the 20th of December. Therefore, it does give the applicant the option to apply for non-determination if we choose to defer. So I didn't want not to alert members to that. And you know, I will repeat that if you do choose to defer, then just be very, very clear on what you're asking the applicant to do as a reason for that deferral. And just to bring in Councillor Maelstrom's request, then yes, I would say that if you do choose to defer, then you do state that you've made no decisions on anything, and that if you do choose to defer, when you do come back to committee, then it is all back in play for the next committee decision.
Okay, so the reason for deferral is that the applicant hasn't demonstrated that it can attach its drainage system to the drainage hierarchy.
Do they need to defer this, or do we need to comment on that? Parson says to respond.
If members feel that is reasonable.
Okay, so we have a motion for deferral, although as our legal representative has just pointed out, that would potentially mean that the applicant can apply for non-determination. What was your question?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so our problem is we have come a cropper in the past with applications where we followed the procedure and then we've had severe problems with drainage after the event, and that's what we're trying to prevent in this instance. Having said that, I am very aware that how we'd like the system to work is not necessarily how the system does work, whether we like it or not, and we've come a cropper on that as well. In the past, when we've made what we felt were sensible, rational, supportable decisions, we've then had them thrown back at us, and it's just been a complete nightmare.
Sorry, Councillor Linthwaite, were you...
A question.
Oh, a question.
Yes. I'm just trying to explain to the members of the public, basically. The question is, at this stage, does the applicant have to give us that more detailed drainage plan that Councillor Hughes is talking about? Because that, to me, seems to be the crux of the matter here. I may be wrong, but perhaps you could advise.
I mean, as I say, I'm not an expert on drainage. All I can say is that the lead local flood authority has confirmed it is satisfied with the information that's been submitted, and it is aware of concerns that have been raised about access to drainage and riparian rights. They're aware of those concerns. They have come back very clearly to say that there is nothing within the application that causes them to object to the principle of development, and I can only go on that advice because I myself am not a drainage expert.
Chair, can I come back on that? Because I believe that the LLFA may not be aware that the document that's on the website dated the 13th of February may be incorrect, because it shows the drainage ditch to be within the applicant's control, not within the control of residents in Windsor Close, and therefore it came to an erroneous conclusion. Now, I would say to the developer, the applicant, that I would be very disappointed if they sued for non-determination, because it's up to everybody to provide accurate information and to demonstrate in a public forum that what they are providing is accurate and is defensible. And in this case, I believe it's not.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, but we are still in questions. So I'm going to take the rest of the questions before I take a vote on that motion. because some of the other questions might potentially be pertinent to it. The next person I've got on the list for a question is it's Councillor Murphy. Did you have a? Okay, so do you want to do so? Okay, so we have a seconder for the motion. So Councillor Murphy, you're seconding. Okay, you have go on, Councillor Maelstrom.
Well, my questions relate to highways, and as we have the highways officer here, I thought it might be sensible to ask them now. Can you clarify the situation with regard to access for agricultural vehicles? Because there seems to be some contradiction in the report on that, unless I've misread it.
Yes, I think I think we were conscious of various options being considered, and the site layout plan does show some provision for agricultural access, and the way that the Highway Authority have dealt with that is to recommend a planning condition to ensure that appropriate details are submitted at the discharge of conditions stage. So perhaps if I can just quickly point you to the relevant condition. It's condition 7. And what we've recommended in that condition is that, I'll read it out to you, it's the existing means of access to the adjoining agricultural land shall be retained for agricultural purposes. Should any alternative access be proposed via Windsor Close, details should be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. So in the first instance, the Highway Authority are insistent that the agricultural access should be taken via the existing access arrangement, not via Windsor Close. But if the applicant chooses
could you clarify what is the existing arrangement?
I believe it's the track that leads to the southeastern corner of the site and runs across the common, the green.
Right. And if for that to come back, for that condition to be varied to allow access through Windsor Close, would that come back to committee?
It would. The applicant would have to come back, by virtue of the condition, the applicant would have to come back and seek the planning authority's approval in writing.
Thank you. And my other question was in relation to this shared space or pedestrian priority. Are there any local examples of this in operation with a development of this size, so 38 dwellings sharing or having a pedestrian priority cul-de-sac like this?
You'll have to forgive me, I can't personally think of one, but I've only been with the authority since July, so I can't point to any particular examples. But the way I'd approach that question is to say that in terms of the County Council's Highway Design Guidance, Planning Streets and Places, the arrangement on Windsor Close would fall within the key parameters of a pedestrian prioritised street. So it's not falling outside the sort of parameters that would be acceptable for a shared space.
Okay, thank you.
So, Councillor Burford, you had some questions.
Thank you, Chair. It does follow on from what Councillor Maelstrom's just asked. So, could somebody give me an estimate of the length of what we seem to be calling an extended cul-de-sac? And am I correct that prioritised streets are where, and I'm quoting, pedestrians move freely anywhere and where drivers recognise that they are a guest? And depending on what you're going to tell me about what is the length of this extended cul-de-sac, would that normally apply to an extended cul-de-sac of that length, whatever it is?
Thanks, Councillor. Just checking the layout plan to give you a length if we can. There should be a chainage on the drawing. But Windsor Close is currently about 50 metres long. The extension runs for the bulk of the application site, north-south through the application site. Within the Highway Authority's guidance, there's no restriction on cul-de-sac length. There's also no restriction on the number of dwellings that could be served from a cul-de-sac. And for a pedestrian prioritised street, the only restriction is the 100 vehicles per hour volume restriction, which, with the proposed development in place and Windsor Close housing as existing, taken together, the level of traffic flow wouldn't exceed, come nowhere near the 100 vehicle per hour threshold.
Councillor Lees,
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, mine goes back to Councillor Linthwaite's question about the parking situation. So if this is granted, are you saying with the parking situation that the people of Windsor Close can't park their vehicles on Windsor Close itself? Or if somebody comes with a mobility vehicle and wishes to park on that street, are you saying that's an obstruction?
No, we're not saying that local residents couldn't continue to park on Windsor Close. I think we might expect that there'd be some adjustment to perhaps the locations as to where people park. For example, people perhaps not tend to park on the bend immediately to the east of Manor Close, but at this stage we're not proposing any waiting restrictions or bans on street parking, because in terms of the existing arrangement and the widths available, the Highway Authority is comfortable that the level of impact arising from the development won't give rise to an adverse, unacceptable highway safety impact along Windsor Close.
Thank you. And going back to the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit, how can that be implemented? Who polices that? 15 mile an hour, sorry. Who polices that?
Yeah, it's not a speed limit as such, it's a design speed. So you aim to get vehicles to comply with that design speed by design of various features along Windsor Close and within the on-site layout.
So, yeah.
Councillor Barefoot.
Yeah, thanks. So just in answer to what you said to Councillor Lees, what exactly are these design features? I mean, do we know what they are?
They haven't been submitted in detail at this stage, but the way in which we're approaching that is by recommending conditions that require those details to be submitted at a later stage, following the grant of outline permission, if that's what's granted.
If I may, Chair, if we're going to defer this, I think that is something we need to know.
Okay. Do we have any other questions before we go to? Okay, Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. We keep hearing about this tilted balance because we don't have a 5-year housing supply, but surely that doesn't trump access and road safety. Could somebody confirm that for me, please?
I can confirm that's correct, that road safety and access are important considerations, that if it were the case that there was a failure to comply with the relevant paragraph of the MPPF, then that would be a justified reason for refusal. But of course, what we have in this instance is we've heard from the County Highways Officer that the Highways Authority is satisfied in relation to those issues. So it would have to be demonstrated that paragraph 6 of the MPPF says development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network following mitigation would be severe, taking into account all reasonable future scenarios. It's a very, very high bar to meet in terms of enabled to be justifying a reason for refusal.
But I think we've heard evidence this evening from speakers where there are, technical points of view from people who are very experienced in this field that haven't really been answered properly by the Highways Department. So, if this is deferred, maybe we can spend more time focusing on some of the issues that people brought up this evening with our friends at Highways.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, we've looked at the water situation, but I've never heard what the EA have said about the level of flooding. What level? 1, 2 or 3 possible? Is that, I can't see it in the document.
It's in the report. It's flood zone 1, so
One,
low probability.
Yeah, it's the lowest. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So.
A problem for somebody else.
One. Yeah. So,
Okay, we have a motion on the floor which is to defer for. Have you got the reasons for deferral?
Shall I repeat?
Clarify the reasons for deferral, because as we said, we have to be completely clear on.
Because the applicant hasn't demonstrated that they can connect any water scheme on site, any drainage scheme on site, to a drainage hierarchy off site. And therefore we're asking the applicant to come back with that information so that we can at least accept that the site is viable in that regard.
Okay, Councillor Lees?
If that is the case that it gets deferred, does it come back to everything that's on the application and not just that issue?
Yeah, we have to have the whole meeting again.
So it's, the whole thing is fully discussed, not just the water runoff.
Okay, so do we have... So we have a motion now. Would anybody like to speak? Councillor Hughes, you've already explained yourself. Okay, no one else? I would like to speak, and I would like to say that I think we need to be very careful here. I think we, as Councillor Lindstrom says, we have fallen foul of this sort of thing in the past. I think there is a very clear condition there that the applicant has to put a detailed drainage plan, which will include where the water goes to, before they can, at the reserved matters stage. This is not what the flooding authority.
Point of order: they do not have to do that at reserve matters stage. That happens after reserve. It's a condition.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, it's a condition. You're correct. Point is, they don't have to do it now. And I think the fact that who owns which bit of the sewer is a red herring. I do not think we should be deferring on this. I think it will get us into trouble for various reasons. That's all. Does anybody else want to speak?
We're not talking about the sewer. We're talking about
Drainage,
rainwater.
sorry, I mean drainage, yeah.
That's another issue, sewerage.
I said sewer, I meant drainage. It's the same principle. Whoever the drainage, the ownership of the drainage is a red herring for the purposes of planning. Anyway, does anybody else want to speak? Captain Murphy.
I remember the last planning meeting we had, and we had Gavin here, and we were talking about conditions and whatever, and the lack of resource that we have. I'm always a bit nervous about keep piling these conditions on. Obviously, some of them are very justified and whatever, but I don't always think we've got the resource to actually make sure that everyone is fulfilled to the nth degree. I suspect with drainage or whatever, it'd be pretty obvious if that wasn't done. But, you know, we're a little bit nervous of all these myriad of conditions. That's my point of view anyway.
Councillor Hughes.
I agree with you on that, Councillor Murphy. We have two developments in Matlock where drainage was conditioned. What didn't go to reserve wasn't discussed at outline, wasn't discussed at reserve matters, was implemented. It has resulted in flooding of houses beneath the site. Drainage is a planning issue, particularly when it requires a Grampian condition, and there is a Grampian condition applied here. So I'm sorry, Lucy. This is an important planning issue.
I don't disagree, but I mean the specifics of ownership are not particularly for us to determine at this stage. That's all I mean. Anyway, does anybody else want to speak before we go to a vote? Nope. In that case, so the motion is for deferment because the applicant hasn't demonstrated that they can access the drainage. What was the wording? Can we have the wording? Sorry.
They can discharge into a suitable watercourse under their control that would meet the drainage hierarchy, a suitable watercourse under their control off-site that would meet the drainage hierarchy. Therefore, the applicant cannot demonstrate a suitable outflow of water. That's what I've got.
Okay, so that's the motion. All those in favour? And I'm, yeah, that's everyone except me. Against? I'm against. Okay, abstentions? Okay, that motion is carried and the application is deferred. And that's the end of the meeting in that case.